Hey there, in this video I want to go into how to choose a meditation technique that is best for you. So one of the things about meditation practice that I'm sure you've probably realized if you've gotten into meditation is that there are a ton of different techniques that we can choose from. And I know that when I was first starting out, at least personally speaking, it was actually really difficult trying to figure out what technique should I use. There was just so many different kinds out there that it felt a little bit overwhelming starting out, and especially just the sheer volume and the amount of different teachers there are. You've got Buddhist meditation techniques, you've got even Christian meditation techniques. There are other Eastern philosophical systems that have their own meditation techniques. And then you've kind of got this New Age movement where people are really into visualizations and law of attraction and manifestation. And then there's a whole subcategory of meditation techniques for that kind of stuff. What do you do? How do you actually choose a meditation technique that's best for you, that actually works? Well, the first thing that we need to establish is, what are your goals with meditation practice? Are you trying to use meditation practice as a way to spiritually awaken, to reach enlightenment? Or are you trying to use meditation to, like I said earlier, manifest something, utilize the law of attraction? Or are you using meditation technique just to feel better, to feel less stressed out, to feel more at peace? And there's no other reason other than you're just trying to deeply chill out. This question, the context for why you're meditating, is going to be personal. It's going to be unique to you. And based on that answer, that's going to play a role with what type of meditation technique you are going to be using. Now, even though we're all going to have very unique reasons that we come to the practice, I still think there are some fundamental principles that we can use to help decide what type of technique is best for us. And this applies across any and all reasons for meditating, at least as far as I can tell. And so that's my aim and hope with this video, is that you can walk away with a really easily and powerful perspective to understand when it comes to picking a meditation technique. This decision, what technique we should be using, it can very well make or break a meditation practice. This can be the determining factor for whether or not we stick to the practice in the long run, or whether it's something that we do short term and then it just sort of fizzles out. I would say, just from personal experience, when it comes to making progress with meditation and staying on the path, the most important factor is just showing up daily. All right, so that's step number one, is just showing up any daily amount, whether it's a minute, 10 minutes, 60 minutes, just any amount at all, and sticking to that. Coming up, returning to the mat or cushion every single day, and keeping that level of commitment. But the second most important factor when it comes to progressing is choosing an appropriate meditation technique. And so this is why it's so important. It truly can make or break your practice. So first off, when we are deciding what technique to use, I would say we need to have a mindset of being experimentative, we are experimenting. So I actually would say a better approach than just picking a single technique is pick a couple of techniques that interest you. Feel free to explore and experiment with choosing a technique, because depending on what technique we choose, we're actually going to get a different experience. What we notice is that, for example, if we are mindfully following our breath, if we're doing mindful breathing, versus if we are doing a body scan technique, that actually has a different experiential output, a different experiential quality to it than if we're doing the other. And so each technique that we use is going to have a different experiential output. And as we explore different techniques, what we're actually doing, in a sense, is cultivating insight into the nature of our sensory system, into our perceptive field, and how experience is creating itself, how it interacts with itself, and how it ultimately is, built to give us our sense of reality and our sense of self. So merely by exploring different techniques, we're actually gaining insight into the nature of different techniques besides the one that we're using, and then we're also gaining insight into the nature of our reality. So, for example, if you're wanting to just chill out, if that's your primary goal with meditation, well, you'll start to see how certain techniques are better at chilling you out than others. And because you can actually examine the contrast from an experiential point of view, because you've taken on this experiment mindset, you're going to actually more deeply understand what it means to relax and how to relax in your everyday life. Whereas if you're trying to spiritually awaken, if you're trying to reach enlightenment, you'll quickly realize, some meditations are not particularly geared towards that, whereas others, maybe something like self-inquiry, where you're asking the question, who am I, or what am I, that might be more powerful with the awakening process versus a visualization technique that's centered around the law of attraction or manifesting, your dream job, or, something like that. So the first thing that I would recommend with choosing a technique is actually don't just pick one. Don't limit yourself to one. I think this is a huge mistake that people make when they first begin. They kind of find a technique, or they listen to a teacher which only teaches one technique, and then they can get in a rut with that technique, or that technique might not actually resonate with where you're at in your life. So like, for example, if I had first just started doing mindful breathing, if that was the only technique that I had started out with, there's a very high likelihood that I would not have stuck with meditation practice in the long run. Because when I first began, trying to stay focused on my breath was next to impossible. It was only because I had other techniques that I was working in with mindful breathing that I was actually able to find some success with meditation. And I actually, again, feel like those other techniques helped me with understanding the place and the role of mindful breathing. So there is this synergistic effect that we can discover when we are experimenting with multiple techniques at once. And like I said before, if a technique doesn't resonate with you at a given point in your life, it's very important that you find a technique that does. Because, seriously, the hardest part is showing up daily with meditating. If you can do that, that's nearly all of it, but not nearly all of it, but it's a large percentage of it. But in order to consistently show up on our cushions or in our chairs or wherever we're meditating, we have to make sure we have a technique set, an instruction set that is working for us, that makes sense, that we're actually seeing progress with, that just feels at an intuitive level like it's the technique that we need to be using. And the thing is that as you discover more techniques, the longer that you meditate, you'll quickly realize and discover, oh, these techniques, these really work for me, and these techniques, they don't really work with me as much. So it's important to, again, have that experimentative mindset and be open-minded to exploring different possibilities within the practice. Another critical perspective that I would say when it comes to choosing a technique is that we need to adopt a mindset of being playful. So not taking the practice super seriously necessarily, but actually having fun with it. If you're not having fun meditating, there's a chance that you're doing it wrong in a sense. Meditation should be fun. It should not be this constant grind. Now, granted, there are some phases in our practice where it is going to become more of a grind. We might have uncovered some sort of emotional blockage, or perhaps we're working through trauma, we're having some sort of emotional release, perhaps we're really fighting with boredom, and then there's an aversion to the boredom. All of that kind of stuff can come up, and it does come up, and this should be expected and not really avoided with practice. However, on the other hand, adopting a mindset of being playful, approaching practice from a state of curiosity and childlike wonder is a really powerful way to approach any technique that you're choosing. And so in a sense, finding the techniques that you are having more fun with, that you feel like you're playing with, those can actually help bolster your practice in the long run. Because if you're having fun, it's a lot more likely that you're going to show up to your cushion, that you're going to sit for longer periods of time. And one of the nice things about any and all meditation techniques that I would say is that you're making progress doing anything. Like I said, the hardest part is just showing up and sitting down. If you've showed up and sat down and are practicing any technique at all, you've already won half the battle. So it, in a sense, doesn't actually matter what technique you're using, as long as you're consistently practicing. You are going to be making progress, really, on any front, any motivation that you have for practice. Showing up is truly a significant percentage of the equation. However, when you start having fun with it and you consistently show up, then your practice really starts to take on this powerful energy and you start to really build serious momentum. For example, there are meditation techniques that are centered around cultivating deep absorption states. These are called the jhanas in Buddhism. So with the jhanas, you're actually actively cultivating very ecstatic, pleasurable states at times, very peaceful, spacious, sometimes like infinitely spacious states of consciousness. You might experience deep, radical states of peace and happiness. These jhanic states are very, very powerful. Well, you might take the perspective if your goal with meditation is, I'm meditating to spiritually awaken. I'm not meditating to chase states and feel high. There's actually a phrase online in the meditation community called jhana junkies. So people that are practicing the jhanas for no other reason than to feel good. And there's sort of this like negative connotation to practicing meditation for no other reason other than you're trying to have fun and feel good. That's somehow antithetical to the practice, or somehow antithetical to the idea of spiritually awakening or reaching enlightenment. But what I would argue is that the fact that chasing those jhanic states, the fact that cultivating, playing with, experimenting with these different states of consciousness, and in this example, this is actually helping you in the long run sustain your practice and build momentum. Sometimes the best way to transcend pleasure or some sort of desire is to actually work through it by experiencing it, by like actually giving into the desire itself. So giving into the desire of, I want to choose a meditation technique that's centered around me, helping me cultivate a sense of ecstatic joy. So that's just one example of how you can be having fun with your meditation practice, even if it's not necessarily centered around your ultimate goal. I would say that your goal, first and foremost, again, I know I keep reiterating this, but it needs to be daily consistent practice. Whatever you have to do to have that daily consistency, that's what you have to do. And adopting this sense of playfulness is extremely powerful with building a momentum for the long run sustainability of your practice. So one of the interesting qualities that starts to happen as we are experimenting with various techniques, as we're playing and having fun with different meditation techniques, is that the nature of the technique transforms over time. So like, let's say you're practicing the do nothing meditation technique. It's Zen meditation. Its official name is called Shikantaza or Zazen. It's where you just sit down and do nothing. That's the whole technique. You're not trying to focus on anything. You're not trying to do anything at all. You are literally sitting down and doing nothing. You're not letting intentionality shape or inform your practice in any way, shape, or form. You're literally just sitting down. Well, you can start doing that technique and have a certain set of experiences, but actually find and discover that the longer that you do it, the technique itself begins to transform and open up in new, strange, curious, and exciting perhaps ways. Doing a technique 1 year into serious practice versus doing that same technique 10 years into serious practice is very likely going to look very different. So this is one of the advantages to actually having practiced multiple different techniques, is that things really start to shape and transform. I would actually say, doing something like a do nothing meditation technique and then bringing the qualities of experience or the insights that you've gained doing that technique to a practice like self-inquiry, that can be very powerful with transforming the way that you experience self-inquiry, and vice versa. Doing self-inquiry can help and inform your do nothing meditation technique or even your mindfulness meditation technique. So these techniques interact and shape one another. And so it's important to realize that one of the key advantages to choosing multiple techniques that you're working on is that these techniques start to shape and transform one another, particularly over time and in the long run. This is one of the huge advantages about not just sticking to a single technique. And on the other hand, it's also an important reason to have like multiple techniques in your tool belt. Another really important facet to this is like what happens if you get burnt out on mindful breathing, for example. Like let's say when you first discovered meditation, you discovered a meditation teacher that teaches mindful breathing, and that's like all that they teach, and so therefore that's all that you do. Well, what happens when you start to hit like a snag or a blind spot, or you start to feel stuck in your practice? This would be a key opportunity to start practicing another technique that you've opened yourself up to. It helps aliven the practice. It helps create a sense of novelty and stimulation to an otherwise rather unstimulating activity. And this can help invigorate your practice and actually push you further along the path, further along cultivating insight or peace or stillness, than if you were to just have stuck with mindful breathing in this example, or just whatever technique you're feeling burnt out on. So it's paramount to understand that by practicing multiple techniques, that can actually be more powerful, more fruitful. That can help you understand consciousness or your sensory experience more deeply than if you were to just use one technique and no other. So that's all to say, remember that these techniques, they actually develop over time and unravel in curious and exciting ways. It doesn't just like starting with one, it's not going to be the same the first time you practice versus 10 years down the line, and especially when you start throwing in multiple different techniques. And so the last thing that I would like to say about this topic, how to choose a meditation technique, is just that, again, meditation practice should be fun. It should be something that is helping you cultivate happiness and inner peace. And then if it's not doing that, if you feel like it's taking away from your peace of mind, this is a really powerful signal from your intuition, I would say, that it's time to explore a different technique, or it's time to shake things up. It's time to maybe even like practice for less time, or perhaps practice at a different time in the day. Just something needs to change. And the first place that I would look to change is the technique that you're using. Meditation should be fun, man. It should be something that we look to for a sense of inner power and inner peace. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say on this topic. But if there are any questions about this topic, please leave them in the comment section below or shoot me an email. And if you liked the video, please hit that like button. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. And I will see you guys in the next one. Until next time.